Hello, this is Justin Williams with the Wolfpacker Podcast. We have a very special guest today. We're recording this on Sunday morning, November 22nd, right after NC State's 15-14 win over number 21 Liberty in football. But this guest is a special basketball guest because we're just getting kicked off into men's and women's basketball season here as Thanksgiving week approaches. Before we get too far into this episode and I introduce our guest, this podcast is brought to you in part by JFQ Lending. With interest rates below 3%, there has never been a better time to lock in a low fixed interest rate on your mortgage. You'll never need to think about refinancing again. Set it and forget it. And with JFQ Lending, you are guaranteed to get the highest level of customer service. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and over 3,000 5-star reviews. Give Hunter Clausen a call today at 480-513-3992 or email Hunter directly at hclausen@jfqlending.com. That's HCLAUSSEN at jfqlending.com. JFQ Lending, Inc., Equal Access Lender, licensed in over 40 states, www.jfqlending.com. And while you're at it, head over to the wolfpacker.com. Take advantage of a special holiday deal we got going on right now. You get 25% off of 1 year of premium subscriptions. That unlocks premium content, news, and analysis of everything NC State athletics on the wolfpacker.com. Plus, we're throwing in a free $75 digital gift card to Adidas gear, so you can get all your special Wolfpack gear. You can do some holiday shopping ahead of time for loved ones. So use code Adidas75 on the wolfpacker.com to take advantage of a special deal, limited time only. Okay, without further ado, I'm introducing our special guest today. He is, I would say, the best three-point shooter of all time at NC State. No doubt about it. The numbers back it up. He's the all-time leader in three-pointers made. He's the 15th leading scorer in program history, Mr. Scott Wood, and now a podcaster. Welcome to the biz, sir, and thank you for joining the show. How are you doing today, Mr. Wood?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I'm, a little tired and fatigued from that game last night. Watching that, it was definitely had me on the edge of the seat. But I'm glad the Pack was able to come back with a win.
Well, we're all dreary-eyed this morning. I think anybody that watched that game needed a breather after that one because that was quite the roller coaster. But let's start off talking about you. You're currently doing a podcast with the Field of 68 podcast network under Jeff Goodman, and the name of your podcast for everyone at home, please go subscribe and listen to his podcast. He's got a couple episodes out with Chris Corciani and Kevin Keats now, and sure some great ones on the way. It's Scott Wood's One Man Wolfpack. That's Scott Wood's One Man Wolfpack. And of course, if you're subscribing to his podcast, you got to subscribe to ours too. So rate, subscribe, review our podcast wherever you listen to him. We're on Spotify, Apple, Google, all that good stuff. But Scott, just tell us a little bit about kind of the backstory behind you getting into podcasting. Before we started the show, you were saying you could never believe that you were ever going to get into the podcasting business. So what kind of sparked this interest for you?
So, I got back home and this is the first year that I decided, I wasn't going to go back overseas. And all of a sudden I got a call and I had no idea who it was. I took the call and it was Jeff Goodman, and he just kind of ran by me. That they were going to start the Field of 68 network. You could see they got Florida, Duke, UNC. There's a bunch of guys on there that you can see in a lot of big programs. So they kind of wanted to do something, kind of under an umbrella where they could kind of put out a lot of content from, big colleges that have, big fan bases, and kind of gave it a thought. And there wasn't a lot of pressure in it. So, we decided to give it a shot. And so far I've had, 2 podcasts and have kind of enjoyed it. So it's just a good way, to get content to fans that, they may not get it here from a former player, interviewing a current player or the coach or, a former player to a former player. So just content to kind of keep them involved, get them some information that they may not have, at some other places. But I'm having fun with it, and hopefully it continues to take off and we can continue to do it.
Well, you mentioned this is your first season not going over to Europe to play ball, and then you were, pro after you left NC State in 2013. So for those listening at home, that after you left in 2013 maybe didn't know where Scott Wood was, just kind of tell us where your journey has taken you, and just kind of, your favorite parts of the past 7 years here, now that you're back home in the States and at home like all of us are right now in 2020.
Yeah, I think everybody's at home probably a little more than what they want to be. But, I left school, did all the pre-draft stuff, didn't get drafted, decided, I wanted to go overseas. So I played in the Liga Endesa, which is probably arguably the top domestic league. Overseas, I played 3 years for the same team in Spain. Then I signed a contract with Golden State, did, their training camp and everything. That was the first year Kevin Durant was there. They ended up winning the championship that year. I still, Kent Lacob is, kind of the assistant GM there. And I give him a hard time that I should probably have my ring since I got my jerseys from the team. So I'm still looking for a ring from Golden State, but finished up there, went to Turkey to France to Montenegro, and then finished up in Spain. So I've kind of bounced all over the place, but it was a good time. It's, very time consuming, especially because I'm over there, 10 months of the year and only get to come home for a 2-month period. But it was a good experience for me, a good experience for my wife to kind of go over there and have a good time and get an experience that, a lot of people don't get.
Well, you're a well-traveled man, Scott. And I guess, you hopped around. Where was your favorite place to be, even though, you weren't places for a long time, but it's hard to pick a favorite, but what would you say was your best memory of those 7 years?
I tell everybody it's hard to pick the favorite. It's easier, when someone says, where's the best food? Where's the best beaches, to break it down. But, it's very easy for me to pick Spain just because I was there for a total of 4 years. You picked up on the language, you kind of got to know the people a little bit. So my favorite, I would probably just say Spain, just because I'm very comfortable with it. If me and somebody went out to a restaurant, I would be confident enough to, speak and maybe order something to eat. So I'd have to say Spain, but, Turkey was gorgeous. Montenegro was gorgeous. There's a lot of, places that I kind of didn't expect to be really nice that ended up being very nice. So they all have their, their pros and their cons, but probably just total favorite, I'd probably go Spain.
So I'm reading here that you were the 2017 NBA D-League 3-point contest champion. And I assume that was when you were with the Warriors franchise. Mm-hmm. What was the deal there? They didn't want to call you up to be the third Splash Bro?
It was rough. I talked with my agent, and it was an experience that I would never, ever get. And we kind of knew going into it, it would be very, very tough to make the actual roster. They ended up taking JaVale McGee. It was like JaVale McGee, Phil Presley. I think it was Elgin Cook, and maybe one other. And so we kind of knew, it would be kind of an uphill climb to make that roster. But I had a really good time. Great story for the actual 3-point contest. So they do the D-League contest and the NBA 3-point contest basically all at the same place. So that year it was at New Orleans. And, since I was with the team in training camp, it was, Steve Kerr. I can't think of his name. The owner of Golden State. Basically, they just got their plane, brought all their all-stars. So they had Kevin Durant, Draymond Green. So we're all up at the front, all the wives, the family. So we all get on this private plane, and I'm like playing in the D-League. For granted, I was with them in training camp, and Steph and Clay ended up being in the 3-point contest that year, not being able to bring it home because I was joking after I won. I was like, oh, yeah, for sure one of them will win. And they ended up not getting it. But, it was just a cool experience. Those guys are great guys. They really make you feel kind of at home, and not even at training camp. I never felt, that I was any different than them. They all treated me the same. So it's just a great experience, for me to be able to be a part of such a great organization.
Well, look, those guys are regarded as some of the best shooters in the league, but NC State fans at home know that on any given night, if you're feeling it, Scott, you could beat them in a game of horse. You could beat them in a 3-point contest. So it would have been interesting to see. The Warriors would have been even more spectacular that year had they had you. So they were missing out, and we're going to be waiting on that championship trophy for you. So put it on the gram once it arrives. We'll be holding out. But interesting. I'm sure you've kept up with NC State over the years. as a pro. It's probably been tough, jumping around, but you just talked to Coach Keats this past week in an episode. So tell us a little bit about, your background with Coach Keats. When did you meet him? Was this one of the first kind of at-length conversations with him? And what's your impression of him going into his fourth season with the program here?
I actually didn't get to meet Coach Keats right away. I think I came home I think it might have been his first year. And I came home and he did the Kevin Keats basketball camp. And so I think it was Thomas Carr at the time, who was an assistant coach, asked me to come do the camp. And so I did the camp. And that was one of the first times, I actually met him and, just getting kind of he'd tell me stories like, yeah, I used to coach Lorenzo. I used to coach Deshaun, which were my former teammates. So that was kind of the first time I met him. And you could just tell he kind of had an aura about him that, he was confident and he really believed that he could, keep the program. They had some good years, keep the program where it was at and try and climb and continue to get better. So, over the time, I've gotten to know him a little bit better, especially with me working out at the Dale, preparing to go back overseas. So, I expect big things from him. I think this is his first full class. I might be mistaken. So, he has all his pieces that he's kind of wanted to implement. So it's going to be really interesting to see how he implements, those parts that he's brought in over the years. And it's starting to look good and it's starting to really take form to what he wants to accomplish at state.
Well, I think this year is going to be a interesting one where you're finally going to see the finished product of what Keats is trying to bring to NC State.
Mm-hmm.
He's got his biggest recruiting class, his highest rated recruiting class coming in 2020, the 5-man class. Plus he's got the transfer and Thomas Allen and a redshirt freshman and Darian Sebron, which we didn't get to see last year. He sat out. So, in the first 3 years, Keats has really kind of been working with a limited roster and particularly limited depth. And as fast as he likes to play, Scott, I'm sure you can speak from experience as a player, but when you're running up and down the floor like that, especially the way Keats wants to push the tempo, it's got to be tough when it's just a 7-man rotation. I would imagine that depth is a very important tool for these players to stay fresh in the up-tempo system that Keats wants to run. What would you say about that?
Well, I loved getting up and down, but particularly only on the offensive end. I wasn't doing much picking up and defending. And, even with me talking with him the other day on my podcast, just getting a feel for what he really wants to accomplish on the defensive end. And, he wants that, kind of pressure, make teams make mistakes without giving up those easy baskets, which sometimes is very tough. If you run into some good teams that are solid at point guard, it's, you might give up a couple of those baskets. So, that he wants to pressure on the defensive end. And I think his mindset comes from the defensive end. And then you got to turn that good defensive possession and speeding their team up to getting a defensive rebound. And now you can push back. So you definitely need the depth there because you're going to have guys picking up full court and they're going to get fatigued at times. So you got to be able to have that good, solid rotation. I think also, kind of losing Jalen and the other kid slipping my mind that decided to go pro. It were kind of unfortunate situations. Anytime he said it again with me the other day, it's you want the best for him, but, it does present a little bit of difficulty. So you lost a couple of recruits there that could have had that added depth in the previous years. So you definitely need it, especially for his style of play of just getting up and down, being fast, especially on the defensive end where it can kind of drain you pretty quick. And you need your guys to be fresh, especially coming down to the last 5 to 7 minutes of the game.
Well, it's interesting you bring up Jalen LeCue and Josh Hall, two of the so-called none and dones in Keats's last couple of years here, and they were big recruits that Keats picked up. Obviously, they committed to NC State, would have ended up in Raleigh had they decided to go the college route, but not unlike many guys that are highly rated coming out of high school these days, they decided to go the pro route, and as fate would have it, Josh Hall and Jalen LeCue are now with the Thunder franchise after the draft. I know LeCue was either late second rounder or an undrafted free agent last year, and then Hall was an undrafted free agent this year. And now they're teaming up with Omer Yurtseven with the Thunder too. Scott, I know Yurtseven was there a little bit in the Gottfried area. Did you ever cross paths with him, or was he a little bit past your time?
So I only crossed paths with him when I came home and would play open gyms. He'd be there. And, he was a little bit, I guess the term would be raw at the time and still kind of developing. But, he's really kind of developed over time and kind of grown into his body, been able to put on weight. And it's also not easy transitioning from that European style of basketball to the American style, which is now really up tempo, especially with him being, I think he's almost 7 foot, being able to guard point guards coming off pick and rolls. So, he's really developed, especially over the years. And I think, we've got Oklahoma City turning into like the NC State pro basketball team. So we're a couple pieces away. So maybe one day I can become an assistant coach there and get some staff from NC State as well.
Well, all they need is TJ Warren at this point. Trade him, but I don't foresee the Pacers trading him anytime soon, particularly the way he played in the bubble. Did you watch? I mean, he was shooting like you in the bubble.
They're not getting rid of him. That'd be the dumbest trade ever. But it's funny because everybody keeps coming up to me and they're like, "Oh, did you expect TJ to do this? Like, did you expect?" And I'm like, "I expected him to do it at Phoenix. He just had a bad system, bad staff, and bad players around him. I mean, I've expected him to do this for a long time. So he's one of the hardest working guys I know, and I mean, he deserves all the success he's getting."
You mentioned the difference with Yurtseven. You mentioned the difference in the European game and the American game. I mean, is speed the only difference, or what would you say would be the best comparison for those that, only understand the American game, but maybe are interested in some of these European prospects coming over to the States and playing, what that transition is like?
Yeah. And I think a lot of it has really changed even since I've left. When I first left State, I always used to compare it to college basketball. It's very similar from, taking college to European, very similar. The only main difference then was physicality. Now I feel like college basketball is a lot more pick and roll oriented, a lot more isolation. So it's kind of almost moved towards the NBA side of it, where it's a little bit more one-on-one, a little bit more ball screen, try and get your guys that can create to make a play. But overseas it's really just about physicality. They don't play as fast. They really utilize, sets and try and run their sets. So a lot more down screens, a little bit less pick and roll. Although I will tell you, over the years, again, I just think pick and roll has become the thing that, you can get a big involved in action, and it's very difficult for them to guard that. So it's slowly getting closer and closer together. But even now, it's much more physical. You got guys over there, same as the NBA, that are 38 years old playing against 16, 17, 18-year-olds in Europe. So it's just a little bit different. But at the same time, I do think it's starting to kind of mesh together into that NBA style game.
Well, speaking of pick and roll, Coach Keats clearly likes to go the pick and roll during his 3 years at NC State, and I would imagine more of it is on the way in year 4. And another guy that really thrived under that type of system was Markel Johnson, senior guard that's now leaving, and of course CJ Bryce, another senior guard that's departing after last season for NC State. There's a lot of high expectations for this team from fans, and based on the buzz around Raleigh, just based on how deep this team's going to be, the talent in the recruiting class, and the returning talent with DJ Funderburk and Devin Daniels coming back to double-figure scores from last season. But there is something to say about losing 2 senior guards. You played with a great senior point guard in Lorenzo Brown during your time at NC State. Could you talk about just how valuable it is, especially when you get into ACC play, to have that guy leading the offense on the court that understands the college game at a 4-year level with that experience? I mean, what type of loss is that? And tell us a little bit about your experience playing with Lorenzo Brown.
It's just a big thing on leadership, especially when you're bringing in this many freshmen. Also, you add in the fact of the virus and not having as much time and as many preseason games to work. You need that leader that, one, can lead by an example, and two, be able to give some criticism to some guys, and they need to accept the criticism and try and get better and build upon it. So it'll be interesting. I know Markel and CJ were a big part of that team, so they're really going to need to fill that void from the leadership aspect of it. And then as far as Lorenzo, Lorenzo was great. I love playing with him. He wasn't natural point guard when he came in. I think they wanted him They had him labeled more as a shooting guard than an actual point guard. And when he came in, they kind of put him in that point guard position, and he really took off and really started to play well. And I think he's at Fenerbahce now, which is a huge team in Europe, and he's having some great games. I think he mentioned the other day on the social media he wanted to be Defensive Player of the Year in the EuroLeague. So he's having a great career even after leaving state, and it was a lot of fun to play with him. He got a lot of guys open and made the game a lot easier for all of us.
So, and didn't he spend a couple times with, or maybe a season or two with the Raptors? I know he made the league for a little bit there. But have you kept in touch with the team from back in your NC State days? I mean, who are you keeping in touch with these days?
I keep in touch with pretty much all of them from time to time. A lot of it's usually when you see a guy post something on Instagram, you just shoot him a quick message about something. But a lot of them are still playing. So, CJ Williams, who was my roommate for 3 of my 4 years, is still playing. I think he's waiting for the NBA season to start to try and see what he can pick up there. Richard Howe from time to time, Lorenzo, Alex Johnson. There's a bunch of guys in there. And when you're at school, you just create a bond with them. I mean, you're literally spending up to 5 hours a day with these guys. So you create that bond that, is always there. Stotts Battle's another one. I just played golf with Stotts the other day. So he was in my wedding. I was in his. So you just create bonds with people, and those are always there. So you try and keep in touch with them as much as you can and try and follow their careers.
So who has the lower handicap, you or Stotts?
Me by far. I mean, no offense to Stotts, but he can hit it around on sometimes.
Now, where would you say who would you compare your game to on tour? I mean, I know on your Twitter you advertise yourself as a good golfer, or what is it? What's the term on your Twitter bio? It's like I
think it's average golf. I may have to change it though. I think I've kind of got rid of the average golfer, and I'm just like above the average golfer, because I saw statistics where like the average golfer shoots about 105, and I think I'm a little better than that now. But that's a great question. See, these are the kind of things that I like to think about and like to say, hey, I'm like that guy. But if I had to pick one, I would probably say like an Adam Scott, just because his swing is just so beautiful that I feel like I'm very particular, and I'm always trying to work on my backswing, which I understand the backswing really doesn't have a lot with actually hitting the golf ball. But I would probably say Adam Scott, just in how beautiful his swing is and how good he hits his irons. So he's not my favorite player, but he probably has the best swing on tour that I would love to have, that kind of style swing.
Did you ever use the belly putter? I mean, if you would really be Adam Scott if you had to transition from the belly putter to the conventional putter. Yeah, see,
I played a lot of rounds with my uncle, and my uncle did that for a while, and he still couldn't putt very good. So there's no chance after I saw that I would give it a shot.
Well, I want to talk about, you mentioned you guys spent a lot of time together when you were here at NC State, and you got really close with your team. In this freshman class that's coming in, they're getting a college experience unlike anything you ever had this year, coming in 2020 during the summer, not even knowing if the season was going to happen or not. And then they come in and it's looking like, we're heading in the right direction, but they haven't really had any classes in person. They haven't gotten to do any of the, the fun social activities that you get to do as a college student, nonetheless, student athlete at a D1 ACC program, a basketball program in that. So, just would you be losing your mind right now if you were one of these freshmen just itching to go? Because they're growing up. They have to grow up quick in this environment. Staying home and being responsible and not spreading this disease to their teammates and everything.
Yeah, I'd say from a social aspect, it's probably a little bit frustrating, just because you see all these movies and what you kind of expect college to be, and then you just get there and now you don't have it. But I would say they're probably just fine at the same time, because you do so much basketball stuff that you don't really have time to sit there and kind of get really bored. So, they're staying involved, doing a lot of things. So it's probably hard for them to kind of contemplate all the things I'm missing out. But at the same time, I think it's partially, I won't say it's really beneficial, but it's partially beneficial because, they are with this team and pretty much only this team. So they're kind of getting to know players on the team probably more than what they would if the virus wasn't here, because they'd, be out hanging out with students and other people. So at the same time, it could be beneficial that they're getting to know, the players on a level that they probably wouldn't have been able to if this situation wasn't like this.
Well, there's a couple of sharpshooters on this team right now. Not to say that there's not more guys that can shoot the rock on this Wolfpack roster, but one really jumps out, and then one's going to be a newcomer this year. And it's kind of based on speculation from what we've heard from Coach Keats and what we've seen on tape from his time at Nebraska. First, it's now senior guard Braxton Beverly, who has been a sharpshooter for NC State through his first 3 seasons here. And, he had a bad back last year during ACC play. He couldn't even sit down on the bench. His back was so hurt, and likely if NC State wasn't, struggling to have 7 guys in rotation, particularly in the backcourt, it may have been a season where he took a few games off to get right. But he's been a sharpshooter. He's I think he's 8th all time on the list now. He's got quite a while to go to catch up to you. I think his count right now, 186 3-pointers made. You have 334. So, he'd have to have a lights out season. Would love to see it. If he's making 150 something threes this year, passes you, NC State's going to be a team to watch out for sure. That's a Final Four bound team if he's making 150 threes. And then Thomas Allen, transfer from Nebraska. I think he shot around 40% in the Big Ten during his sophomore season. But Scott, have you watched them at all? What's your opinion of their stroke? You have one of the most beautiful basketball shooting strokes I think I've ever seen at NC State. So what have you seen from them? And just kind of, you might want to go to Reynolds sometime when all this is over and we got the vaccine, and maybe challenge them to a game of horse, see who really, might have to put them in their place.
Yeah. Obviously Braxton's the first one that sticks out. He's had a great career through his first 3 years. It's like you said, a little bit unfortunate on the injury aspect, or he'd probably be a lot higher on that list. But I think for him, he just needs to be put in situations where he can kind of thrive. And I think they're going to have somebody to I think, be very, very successful. I think they're going to be good regardless, but to be very, very successful, I think they're going to need that guy that can spread the floor and, try and get DJ on the post, be able to get Devin in some isolation situations and not have to have, another guy coming over and helping. So I think they're going to have to find a way to utilize them, whether it's, I've always had coaches in the past where if I had a really good big guy, put me and him in some downstream situations so that it's hard for him to come when he comes off a curl. It's hard for the big to step up and help because you have such a good big offensive player. So maybe put him and DJ in some situations. Also, even just entering the ball in the post to him, because if you enter the ball in the post to him, Braxton's guy's not going to want to help and dig in on DJ as much because they know he can shoot. And if he does, DJ just passes it right back and it's just an easy shot. So I think for Braxton, it's just getting in some good situations where he can be successful, especially at the beginning of the year. I'd like to see him kind of have a few big games to really get that confidence early on and then start moving. And as far as Thomas, I haven't seen a lot of him. I know he was a real good offensive weapon at Nebraska. And, obviously you said Coach Keats has done some good shooting early on in the preseason. So I really do think they're going to need a few guys to spread the floor, especially when Braxton comes off the floor. Maybe Thomas comes in and shoots and spreads the floor for him. But they're going to need that to really keep the pressure off Devin and DJ to kind of open things up so, they can't get trapped. Because if nobody's making shots on the team, they're going to suck in, and it could be a really long night and a rough night offensively for us.
Well, for both of them, they are going to have an opportunity to get a hot start in the shooting category at Reynolds Coliseum this year. They're going to open the season on November 25th in the Mako Medical Wolfpack Invitational. I believe they're opening with Charleston Southern on Thanksgiving Eve at 8 p.m. So looking forward to that one. But, Scott, I want to ask you about playing in Reynolds Coliseum during your time at NC State. Do you remember how many games you had? I mean, I would imagine just a handful. They're going to have, probably 3 or 4 games at Reynolds this year for this team. So that'll be kind of a cool, special experience for them. But what's it like as a shooter, being in a smaller gym, and maybe, having different vantage points around to kind of, get your feel for draining those threes the way you do?
I personally preferred a smaller gym. The background was just a little bit different. Everything felt a little bit closer. So I always preferred it. I loved shooting at Reynolds. I think we do 1 preseason game and then we'd play 2 regular season games in there. But I've always enjoyed it. You walk around that place and you just really get a feel for the history of NC State, not only the men's team, but the women's team, the softball teams in there, the volleyball teams in there. So you really get a feel for the history of, sports as a whole. So it's a special place for NC State. I think I've been in there maybe once. I haven't been in there for a game or anything like that since they've done the renovation. But, it's just a special place for NC State. And anytime we get to see a game in there, it just brings back great memories of, the real great NC State basketball programs, as well as the other sports programs that have played there.
So kind of to wrap this all up, and again, Scott, thank you for joining us. And please be sure, if you're listening to this podcast at home, to subscribe to his podcast, One Man Wolfpack with Scott Wood, on the Field of 68 network. But just want to know your expectations for this team, just based on what based on the returning talent that's coming back. You got DJ Funderburk as the leading scorer and rebounder on this team coming back, a guy that, maybe started a little bit slower last year, but had a really hot finish to the year and clearly has talent as a big. Manny Bates, an elite shot blocker down low to complement him, and Devin Daniels, an experienced guard to kind of combo with Beverly and Allen with experience in that backcourt. Daniels is going to be the second leading returning scorer. But then you got all these freshmen coming in, and you're losing a couple senior guards. But you got Keats in his 4th year. He's feeling a little bit more comfortable. It's going to be a really random year. We hope to get in as many games as possible. There's 27 on the schedule, as Keats has not been afraid to share. He's just trying to get in as many as he can. I think the cutoff is at least 13 to make the tournament. But ACC is going to be back to being loaded again. Going to be another tough conference, as it always is. So Scott, just kind of, does this have the feeling of a tournament team to you, or a rebuilding year? Or, is it kind of hard to gauge at this point just because 2020 is so random? Yeah.
And, I've never been a big expectation or put a label on them. But if I did, I'd say I believe that this roster with the coaching staff being there now I think they'll be one of those teams that should be in the tournament. Do I think, they're going to be 1-2 in the ACC? Probably not. But at the same time, I think they'll put themselves in a good situation to have an opportunity to make the tournament. And that's all you can ask for. And then try and make noise in the tournament. So it'll be very interesting. There's just so many uncertainties to even, make a claim, for sure they're going to be, top 5 in the ACC or definitely be a tournament team. And I think that's kind of why Coach Keats is kind of hesitant on a lot of things he says as well, because you just really don't know. There's so many uncertainties. Like, what happens, 3 teams in the ACC all of a sudden get the virus. What is this going to do? Are we going to cancel games? Are we going to postpone games? So it's just, it really is. It'll be interesting. And I hope that they can get as many games in as they can, especially for, your senior sake and these guys that have really dedicated everything to playing this year. But it'll be interesting. I think they do have a good roster. I think they need to, make some shots from the outside, develop some leadership after losing those seniors, but it'll be here quickly. So no preseason games to prepare. So they got to be ready now.
Well, it's a weird year when NC State is hosting Carolina 3 days before Christmas. It just seems weird. You always play Carolina once in January, once in February, typically, midway around the month. And now it's, there's probably going to be no fans. I'm sure what would, I know I said last question, but what would be playing a rivalry game against Carolina with no fans? How weird would that be? Would it still be easy to bring the juice for a game like that?
Yeah, you can ask as many questions as you want. It's fine. It is not going to bother me. We could do this all day, but I think it will be weird. I think there's going to be a lot of aspects where teams are probably going to maybe upset teams because, no offense to Boston College and my man Dennis Clifford, who's my good buddy, but you go play at Boston College, and even with fans, you're like, it's Boston College. So it'll be a little bit different because I think you start to lose, a little bit of edge and a little bit of fire and passion that you once had. But at the same time, you watch, the NBA bubble, and now all of a sudden you're hearing half the stuff that people are saying. So I think it can help the scout of the teams as well. So it's just going to be interesting. It is going to really, really stink for the seniors and even your freshmen that, you're going to play Carolina and Duke in a big rivalry game, the ones that you've been looking forward to, the ones you've been watching on TV the last 2-3 years of your recruiting. And now it's just going to be a game with no fans. But, at the end of the day, they're all going to end up counting, and you got to be ready, and you got to try and go out and win.
And likely a nationally televised game. These guys are going to get their own NBA Orlando bubble experience playing in front of, half a dozen people, crickets on the other end. I'm sure there'll be music played and maybe some artificial crowd noise. But do you think the fans kind of overhype the value of attendance? I know the fans play a big role at NC State, particularly in those big games. But, these guys have come up playing the AAU circuit their entire life before a couple dozen people. They compete and practice every day. When you get to that level, you've got to be able to bring the juice when there's nobody watching. So, how much do you think it really impacts the actual performance on the court, as politically correct as you can be as a Wolfpack guy that's beloved by all of Wolfpack Nation?
Listen, we'll start with, I love Wolfpack Nation till I die. For me, as a player, I could have played in an empty gym and been okay, because my goal every game is to win the game. That's all I care about. I could care less who's there. I could care less if my mom's there, my dad's there. I'm going out to win the game. I don't care who's across from me. When I step on the court, I want to play to win. But at the same time, you have to understand there's a lot of guys I've played with in the past, they get up for these bigger games. They get up for these fans. They don't necessarily play well against the Boston College games because, hey, it's on ESPN Ocho and there's 7 people out there, so they don't care as much. So it will be interesting because you're going to have players like that have, they just want the big moment to shine in the big moment. And, sometimes they have really big games. And then you're going to have guys like me that just are like, hey, I just want to win. I don't care who's there. I want to play basketball. I want to win. So it'll definitely have an effect. But at the same time, you just kind of got to be ready for it. And it's kind of like you mentioned as well. You do it every day in practice. You just got to take what you've done in practice to the actual game and play a good game.
My theory is I think NC State may have better success in the Carolina game with no fans in PNC Arena. Now, hear me out. I know the fans are great and they make it loud and they make it tough for the Tar Heels. But during your time for being in college, there's a different feeling when you step into PNC Arena on a Carolina game night. There's a little bit of tension. There's so much of a hunger to beat those guys. And Roy Williams and those Tar Heels love to come into PNC Arena and play spoiler. I think they play better in PNC Arena than they do in the Dean Dome when the two teams meet up. So I guess my tinfoil hat theory here is this: it would be the most NC State thing possible to see NC State get over the hump. Keats gets his first home win against the Tar Heels when there's no fans there. What do you say about that, Scott?
It's again, I think it will be interesting, but it also kind of takes away a little bit of pressure from a player because, you really do want to satisfy the fans. You want them to be proud of you. And now that they're not there, it's kind of like, oh, it's just basketball. Let me just go do what I've been doing my whole life. So again, I think there's a little bit of less pressure, but at the same time, it's less pressure on the other side as well. So, it's an interesting theory, and I'm interested to see how it all goes. But at the same time, I honestly just hope they get the games in. I hope they get the opportunity to play. I hope they get the opportunity to play Carolina twice, Duke twice, the teams they should play. But it'll be an interesting season. So I'm looking forward to it.
Well, at least there's some good early tests. You got the Michigan game in Ann Arbor. You got UConn at a neutral site in December. So it'll get interesting really quick. But Scott, again, thanks for joining us. We're going to have to get out there on the golf course soon, and I'm going to have to put you to the test to see how low that handicap is. See if that Adam Scott comparison is accurate. If you're right about your Adam Scott comparison, I'm sure you probably play better at Augusta National than anywhere else.
If only I had the opportunity.
Well, if any
handicap would go up though if I played at Augusta National, I can promise you that.
Well, if any members of Augusta National happen to listen to the Wolfpacker podcast, please know not only Scott Wood, but myself would be very, very interested in the invite, So just putting that out there, just small percentage chance. But anyways, Scott, thank you. Please, listeners at home, go subscribe to his podcast, One Man Wolfpack with Scott Wood. It's great. I already listened to the whole Chris Corciani episode. I listened to half of the Keats episode, but it's been a busy football weekend for me, so I'm going to go finish that this afternoon. They've both been great. You're doing a great job, Scott. Looking forward to see what you do with the podcast. And listeners at home, again, please take advantage of that promo code Adidas75 on the Wolfpacker.com. You get 1 year of premium membership to the Wolfpacker.com for premium content, news, and analysis of everything NC State athletics for just $75 for a whole year. Plus, you get a free $75 digital gift code to Adidas gear. You can use it online on whatever you want, gifts for loved ones or some good NC State gear. They had those Blood Moon jerseys in football a couple weeks ago against Florida State. Those are pretty sweet. So go check those out. Maybe they're still on the site. And follow us on Twitter. You can follow us at the Wolfpacker. You can follow Scott at Scottwood15. Again, he says average golfer, but be looking out for his bio. See if he changes that to above average golfer. Are you single digit handicap guy?
I'm right on the cusp.
Okay, right on the cusp.
I think I'm at a 10-4 right now. But my club that I normally play is on the tougher end of it. So, but I haven't been playing great lately. I plan on trying to get to the range before the NFL starts. So maybe I can get a little bit better today.
All right. Well, Scott, I don't want to take up more of your time. I know how that Sunday schedule goes. So again, follow Scott at Scottwood15. You can follow me at Justin H. Will. Like us on Facebook, NC State Wolfpack on the Wolfpacker.com. And for Scott Wood, this is Justin Williams, and this has been the Wolfpacker Podcast.